anybody home.
Today, I want you to open your mind.
I've almost come to the conclusion that the story is so damning that the mass of people can't deal with it.
We are in process of developing a whole series of techniques to get people actually to love their servitude.
We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
To change the minds and the attitudes and the beliefs of the people to bring about one world socialist totalitarian government.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists.
It has patterned itself after every dictator who has ever planted the ripping imprint of a boot on the pages of history since the beginning of time.
If you can get people to consent to the state of affairs in which they are living, then you have a much more easily controllable society than you would if you were relying wholly on clubs and firing squads and concentration camps.
Tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices.
As you connect the dots between different people, organizations, religions, history, suddenly the picture starts to form.
The kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men.
Someone born in the United States is not more special than someone born in Mexico. They're just vehicles for the consciousness to experience.
They do not want your children to be educated. They do not want you to think too much.
It was learned that the aliens had been and were then manipulating masses of people through secret societies, witchcraft, magic, the occult, and religion.
They reach into our children. Music, television, books.
Prey on children's innocence.
How can I disprove lies that are stamped with an official seal?
So if you have the opportunity to stand next to one of these machines, it feels like an altar to an alien god.
Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun.
The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc is now in the possession of the Army.
Too many others know what's happening out there, and no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth.
Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete. A case to be filed under M for Mankind in the Twilight Zone.
About time some of you got acquainted with the real hard truth.
If you don't connect the dots, it's just a mass of what's all this about.
You are listening to the Secret Teachings Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Gable. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of TST, Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, in the free and subscription archives, and on Fridays, a video stream that is free to listen and watch. It is the 29th of May, 2026, and we are still waiting for those aliens or those UFOs or UAPs or whatever we're calling them nowadays. We're still waiting for those. We're still waiting for disclosure. See, I, like a lot of you, was under the impression that White House, because I was told this by a bunch of different types of media, that the White House was preparing to disclose the existence of aliens or UFOs or something to that effect. I'm not really sure what the hell anybody's even talking about, frankly. I'm not exactly sure what the government or what the believers or the skeptics even believe one way or the other. I'm not really sure. I'm not even sure if we're on the same page about any of this stuff, because I was under the impression that we were supposed to get disclosure, but how do you define that? What does that mean? It means something different to everybody. If you can't describe something, it's obviously unidentified, so that doesn't mean it's alien. It could be anything. It's a Pandora's box of unexplainable, unidentified phenomena. I was under the impression that we got 2 UFO data dumps, and they were both supposed to be disclosure, but every time we get a new dump, we're also told that, don't worry, we've got a lot more to show you. There's a lot more disclosure that's going to happen, but also this stuff's preparing us for the real disclosure. So I can't really keep up with it. It doesn't make any sense. It just seems like a big joke. And if there was any question of whether or not it was a joke, I think the White House has made it very clear that they are taking this subject and they're turning it into a joke if it wasn't a joke before, which I think it has been from the beginning. But they're turning it into a joke. And the joke is, haha, got you. We're actually talking about illegal aliens. We're not talking about extraterrestrials, which, of course, was kind of a joke that we threw around here on the Secret Teachings. I've heard other people within this field sort of do the same thing. You know, kind of, haha, maybe the government will say, we're going to disclose the existence of aliens, but they're not actually talking about extraterrestrials. They're not talking about ET phoning home. They're talking about people from Mexico, or they're talking about people from South America, or they're talking about people from maybe the Middle East or China. They're not talking about extraterrestrials, which I think just demonstrates to us not that there's a cover-up, not that there's some kind of giant conspiracy. I think it proves to us that the people in charge that we assume have this information don't. We assume they have some kind of information that they're the government officials, they're the military, they're the intelligence community. They know. I don't know if they know. In fact, I'm pretty sure they probably don't know. I'm pretty sure they probably don't know. Because a lot of people in our government are struggling to figure out how fast food isn't actually good for you. Like, that's an actual discussion that's happening at the federal, the highest levels of our government. It just beats us. We have no idea why people are so overweight and so sick. Now, look, if you can't figure that one out, it's pretty obvious. It's pretty clear. I don't think you're going to be able to figure out the UFO, UAP subject. And you'll treat it with the same level of childishness that you treat the food issue with. We have no idea what's causing all this heart disease and diabetes. We have no idea what's causing all the obesity. We have no idea what's making people so sick and so fat and dying so early. We don't understand. We just can't figure it out. We need commissions. We need to spend billions. We need to figure out a new drug. Yeah, I don't think that these people have the ability, quite frankly, to even comprehend the potential complexities of whatever the UFO or the UAP subject implies. And as Tim Curley in the chat says, Tim for the win, these UFO releases are just distractions from the Epstein crimes, which I don't think that's the only thing they are. Anything can be said to be a distraction, but in one way, one form or another, I think that Tim is right. I think that a lot of it has to do with Jeffrey Epstein and the exposure of this entire network, which, of course, implicates a foreign country that is our greatest ally, as we're told repeatedly. A country that's also been part of the exploitation of the UFO subject, because if these things are part of the creative force of the universe and of humans, then of course they are the ones that are talking to them, and they're chosen, and we get to meet the gods that chose them, and the rest of us are cattle. So I think that a lot of this has been exploited by different groups of people. I think people that are trying to cover their asses, and this is across the board. Anybody who has a couple of brain cells, who sees this as an opportunity to manipulate people, to change narratives, I think that's what's happening. And I don't think it's some concerted, giant conspiratorial effort. I think a lot of people just see it. Oh, we can take that. We can use that. We can exploit that. And that's pretty much the bottom line. Now, if you're not watching the video, you don't see the show promo, although if you're in the archive, you'll see the little thumbnail. Tonight's show is called Aliens. They Walk Among Us. And you see a little kind of subtitle there that says, for 60 years, the U.S. government has kept a closely guarded secret. And I'm not surprised, but some people are surprised that that closely guarded secret actually isn't aliens. Well, it's not the kind that you kind of assume they are. They're illegal aliens. They're illegal immigrants, people that have maybe come into the country illegally or people that have overstayed their visa. And that's what the government is talking about. And I don't even really see that we've done anything much with that subject either. I think that even the illegal immigrant issue is a giant joke too. I don't think much has been done about that, especially after 80-something Israeli groups, Jewish groups, wrote a letter to the president saying, don't enforce this. And then the president said, okay, no problem, we won't enforce it. And they just pay lip service to this stuff. It's really a joke. It's unfortunately a joke. Let's get right into the topic. Let's get right into the subject matter here. I've got a bunch of different stories pulled up that I'd like to go through this evening on the show. I'll remind you that if you'd like to reach out to the Secret Teachings, if you'd like to contact me directly, I don't have a producer, I don't have a team, it's just me. You can email me at rdgable at yahoo.com. That's rdgable at yahoo.com. You can find us on the website, which I'm in the process at some point, hopefully in the next year, of getting a new website. But right now, it's a very simple website. You can go to the website, find the archive, get a copy of one of my books, etc. The links are below on YouTube. If you're in the audio archive looking for links, they should be below. If you're on Apple, Spreaker, Spotify, if not, you'll have to go to the website and click on them there. That's tstradio.info. Let's take a look at some of these riveting stories in the news. Here's the Daily Mail, one of the very few that are just like obsessively covering this story. And every time they publish something, it's like the exact same series of headlines, the exact same 10,000 advertisements that I have to remove from the screen to be able to even read the article. It's just a bunch of clickbait trash is what it is. But here's the Daily Mail. UFO and alien evidence to take center stage on Capitol Hill in just days. So just a few days, we'll see the evidence. And of course, as most of you know, in a few days, this would be on June 9th, we won't actually see any evidence. How do I know that? Well, see, I don't live in this endless cycle of believing something's going to happen, it doesn't happen, and then I'm just going to default back to believing it's going to happen again. I don't live in that endless cycle. I know a lot of you don't live in that endless cycle. Unfortunately, a lot of people do live in that endless cycle, and they get really hostile about it if you suggest that predictions or these types of statements are actually incorrect. It's just to generate attention. People that are doing this also tend to make quite a bit of money. For example, Louis Elizondo right now is on a tour. I woke up this morning, I clicked on this article, and for some reason, maybe the algorithm shifted, I started getting a bunch of Elizondo posts, and Elizondo is out there on a tour right now, making money selling fake stories that have been proven, even by his own admission, to be fake, including a chandelier and a irrigation circle, not to mention Corbell's flare video that just happened to be filmed essentially in his backyard, assuming he still lives there in the 29 Palms area. So on tour selling fake UFO stories, also selling what is essentially a fake Pentagon program, a very misleading Pentagon program, and making a lot of money off of it. Now, there's nothing wrong with making money, but maybe you should do it by telling people the truth and not selling people nonsense. I mean, I've got no issue with making money. It's just if I'm lying to people to make the money, then that's a different story. So on June 9th, David Grush and several members of Congress will gather at the U.S. Capitol to call for the public release of UFO-related evidence that Grush says remains hidden in classified government channels. Now, am I reading this correctly? Am I to understand that David Grush, who's only heard from somebody else, about these things that he's told Congress, and then he's also told Congress, look, I can't give you the specifics, but if we talk off air, I can tell you. And then he spoke off air to Congress, and members of Congress came out and were like, well, that was a waste of time. He didn't say anything in the meeting. That's the same David Grush. But I'm to understand that this guy and a bunch of members of Congress, I wonder who they could be. It couldn't be Burchett. Couldn't be him, could it? Could it be Anna Paulina-Luna? Could it be the same cast of clowns that have been at this for years? Could it be the same group of people? Probably. And they're going to demand the release of the information. Well, I thought that's what those videos were. I thought that's what all those documents were that the government has supposedly declassified, even though I've got copies of them from decades ago, even though most of this stuff has been known on every Discovery and History Channel show that I think has ever been aired about UFOs, and has been written about in virtually every UFO book that's ever been written, ever. So I don't really see, like, I thought we just got disclosure of something, and apparently no, now we need to have another meeting to demand disclosure. So this is that endless cycle that I'm talking about. Just, we're going to get it. Oh, look, we got videos. Okay, they don't actually show what we think they might show. So let's have another UFO conference on the steps of the White House or on the steps of Congress, or let's get people together, the same exact group of people together, and let's demand, more disclosure. And for the record, that is who's going to be at this event. It's going to be the same cast of characters. They keep saying these things. It always irritates me. They say members of Congress. Okay, members of Congress. What members of Congress? The same ones? The exact same ones over and over again? So if you say members of Congress, then it sounds official. If you say ex-military, it sounds official. But as most of you know, there's a lot of people who were in the military. Maybe they were just working behind a desk, and they've chosen to use their background. They have an official military background, and they choose to use that background to claim that they worked on some secret project. They have evidence that they were in the military, but no evidence they worked on any secret project. Of course, they can never tell you that because they'd have to kill you. They can never tell you that because it's, of course, top secret, even though they're talking about it. And if they tell you the specifics, they'll be killed, or they'll have to kill you or something. But then they can also tell you they worked on a program that equally is a secret, that if you talked about it, you'd probably end up prosecuted or killed. But don't worry about the contradiction there. It's totally fine if they just make these claims. Ex-military, members of Congress, scientists. I love that one. Everybody's a scientist. David Wilcock's a scientist. Yeah, everybody's a scientist now. Some drunk high girl named Eskridge, she's also a scientist. Yeah, she's a scientist. On video, drunk. On video, I'm pretty sure doped up on something, and on video drinking, and then we should trust her. She's the source of information. She was running the same kind of, as far as I'm concerned, in my opinion, a scam like Stavati Aerospace is. It's just the same cast, or the same types of cast of people, and it never seems to change. Now, you might think that means that I'm some hardened skeptic. I'm not. I'm not a skeptic. I'm also not a believer. I have a different view on all of this stuff. I think what's happening is that we are still, by we, I mean our society, I think our society is still operating under a number of old military intelligence plans and guidebooks for dealing with whatever the UFO is, which of course is something that's been around for thousands of years and has changed over time with how technology develops. We tend to see it in the way that our technology has advanced. So I believe that we are still operating under the guidebook of things like the Robertson Panel Report, which you can see on your screen right now. I believe we are operating under the control or the influence of the proposed studies on the implications of peaceful space activities for human affairs, otherwise known as the Brookings Report, which was put together by a think tank and a bunch of scientists. This report is from the 1990s, and it is often cited as the reason why we cannot have disclosure, because society would collapse. We'll take a look at this here in just a moment. We go back to the Robertson panel report. You can see the front page here of this report. This was back in 1953. And if you search it, there's a lot of really interesting stuff in this document. But here's probably the most important, and I know I've read this on the show before, but it's important for tonight. They talk about debunking, and they put the term debunking in parentheses. So you'll see this. It says educational program. And they're talking about these unidentified flying objects. The educational program for these unidentified flying objects. The panel's concept of a broad educational program integrating efforts of all concerned agencies was that it should have two major aims: training and, quote, debunking. Now, debunking is in parentheses because debunking means, in this particular context, debunking means we're going to tell them that it's fake, but we don't really know what it is. And that's a consistent theme throughout this document. This is the same reason they say that they're going to infiltrate UFO groups to see if they know anything before the government or the military does, the intelligence community, and to see if maybe someone figured something out before the military, government, or intelligence community did. That's why they say debunking, because not really debunking it in the way that you might kind of assume that word would otherwise imply. So here's what they say. The training aim would result in proper recognition of unusually illuminated objects. So balloons like the one we shot down with a multi-$1,000 missile, aircraft reflections, as well as natural phenomena, meteors, fireballs, mirages, etc. Both visual and radar recognition are concerned. There would be many levels in such education, from enlisted personnel to command and research personnel. You can read this for yourself, the rest of it, or you can pause and you can read it here on the screen. The training should result in a marked reduction in reports caused by misidentification and resultant confusion. Now, this particular section here is of interest to us for tonight's show. It says the following: the debunking aim would result in reduction in public interest in flying saucers, which today evokes a strong psychological reaction. This education could be accomplished by mass media such as television, motion pictures, and popular articles. Basis of such education would be actual case histories which had been puzzling at first, but later explained. As in the case of conjuring tricks, there is much less stimulation if the secret is known. Such a program should lend to reduce the current gullibility of the public and consequently their susceptibility to clever hostile propaganda. The panel noted that the general absence of Russian propaganda based on a subject with so many obvious possibilities for exploitation might indicate a possible Russian official policy. This also, of course, indicates that our government was not aware back in the 50s of what these things are, what this phenomena is, and the same is true today. This is why they cannot tell you the truth, because they don't know the truth. The truth is out there, but they don't know the truth. They're not sure what is happening. They're not sure what all of this is about. Now, that's important because clearly the same thing is true today. And if you read through this, when they're talking about debunking, they're talking about misleading the public, not because it's fake and not necessarily to cover up, although the military, of course, utilized it, the subject for this, not necessarily to cover up exotic craft that they were constructing at secret military bases, like, say, the SR-71, the F-117. They were doing this because there is something real. They're not sure what it is, and they're trying to figure it out before the Russians or before anybody in the general public figures it out. This is where, if you read through this section, you'll read how the James Handy Company, which made World War II training films, was also suggested, as well as Walt Disney animated cartoons. These were suggested as ways in which to disinform and mislead the public. Dr. Nynek suggested that the amateur astronomers in the U.S. might be a potential source of enthusiastic talent to spread the gospel. It was believed that business clubs, high schools, colleges, and television stations would all be pleased to cooperate in the showing of documentary-type motion pictures if prepared in an interesting manner, which is essentially all the Discovery Channel and History Channel has been through my entire life. It's just basically this. The use of true cases showing first the mystery and then the explanation would be forceful. This particular line here, I think, is one of the most important in the entire document. I think it's the most important, or one of the most important lines in the entire document, because this is precisely what is happening right now in real time, especially on social media. True cases, like true mysteries, we don't know what they are, but then we learn what they are, and actually it's not so much of a mystery. We can actually explain it, and so it's not really that fascinating once you explain it. In other words, something that looks wild, looks weird, looks otherworldly, and then you show that to the public, everybody gets excited. And, well, actually only a few people get excited. I don't think anybody really cares. They're really concerned about how much gas costs or food costs or rent costs, but some people get excited. And then you pull the rug out from under them and you tell them, actually, that was just very, very verifiably a balloon. That was very verifiably a drone. That really actually was just a camera issue. But those stories, those cases are kind of like low-hanging fruit, because there's a certain percentage, as in Project Blue Book, that they still don't know what they are. That doesn't mean that there's not a natural, I mean, even aliens, I guess you could say, is a natural explanation, but it doesn't mean that there's not like a really standard, basic scientific explanation for it. It doesn't mean that they're aliens. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that they can't explain it. But there's something else, something more to those particular cases. Those are not the ones that were being shown. We're being shown the ones that are really easy to debunk. But at first, they appear to be, wow. And so I give you some of those examples, some of the wow factor examples, where when you first look at it, you think, wow, is that real? And then you learn, no. Well, I mean, it's real, but it's not alien. Here's one of those examples. This is a story that's over 10 years old, and this has been circulating as if it has been released by the government, kind of like with Project Northwoods, which I've had a physical copy of since I was in film school back in 2010. I had a physical copy because we made a documentary on it. And relatively recently, like the last 5 years, we were told that the Trump administration declassified that document. And I said, nope, I've had it for 16 years in my possession. It's been around for a lot longer than that. Twice my lifespan. No. Trump, he's the one that did it. He's the one that released that file about Northwoods. No, he didn't. And really the only other person I had seen make a fuss about that was David Icke, who said, nope, it's been around for a while. They're misleading you and disinforming you. And that's what a lot of this, or getting to the bottom of the truth, is all about. It's just another disinformation campaign. So anyway, here's that video. You can't see it if you're listening only, but this is well, you'll know what this is. This is the National Park UFO. This is the one where actually it's a stormtrooper balloon. Remember that? And when I say stormtrooper balloon, I mean a literal stormtrooper balloon. It was a Star Wars stormtrooper that went up in the sky, and people videoed it. There's light reflections because of the sun, and said it's an alien, or it's some kind of light being or something like that. Which, funny thing is, this balloon actually is still more realistic than the Stephen Greer light beam, or whatever the hell that Emery Smith and others were selling. This is actually more realistic than that. They could have just launched a Star Wars balloon. But they say that this video, even though it's been debunked, is very similar to the recent UAP video. You can look at these, and it's like, well, maybe it's the exact same video. It seems to be doing the same thing. We know that the one on the left, it looks like it's standing on one leg and dancing. It's just twirling in the air. The one on the left is actually a stormtrooper balloon. The one on the right looks exactly the same. It probably is the same video. They've maybe just put a filter on it. I don't know if it's the exact same video, but it looks suspiciously like the same video. But at first, especially if you've never paid attention to any of this stuff, at first, it looks compelling. Even for me, when I got on the internet, when that new file batch was released a few days ago, I saw this and I thought, okay, what exactly is that? And then I remembered within a matter of a couple of seconds, oh, that's that fake video. But no, they're claiming it's a new video. It's a re-released, or it's a new video they've released, enhanced, or I've heard every claim in the book, and it's just a balloon. And so I'm looking at this and thinking, well, at first it looks like something really interesting, and then if you think about it for a moment, then you realize, oh, that's quite literally a balloon. And the one on the right, for those of you who can't see it, looks identical to the stormtrooper balloon, or pretty close to identical. So I'm pretty sure that that's the same thing, or it might actually be literally the same video that they just put a filter on and made it black and white. That's maybe in a different wavelength. And so I'm looking at this and thinking, this is exactly the type of thing that we read in the Robertson panel report. True cases showing first the mystery and then the explanation, and how that would be forceful to convince the public that there's really nothing to see here. Here's another example. This is the Boy Scout balloon. We're going to play this video again. This is Sean Kirkpatrick, the former director of the Pentagon's Arrow program, explaining what this object actually was that was shot down by a $500,000 missile. $500,000 to blow up a balloon.
Do you know what we shot down? Balloons. And the worst one, absolute worst one, was they shot down a balloon that had a tethered package on the bottom that had a transponder on it, that was built, flown, and operated by a Boy Scout group that had circumnavigated the globe 8 times before we shot it down with a $500,000 missile. All right. It's awesome. Fantastic. You can imagine the response on the Hill when I briefed that. Now, on top of that, other balloons that would be seen, and this is to my point of these weapon systems aren't meant to characterize and understand these things. There was another balloon that was shot down, and the pilot described it as having potential stealth-like capabilities, and that they couldn't get a good lock on it. And the reason they couldn't do that is because it was a star-shaped Mylar balloon from Walmart. Said happy birthday on the side. We got a real nice close-up in the AIM missile before it blew up. Right.
In other words, what he is talking about, this is Sean Kirkpatrick, what he's talking about here is not that we see something strange in the sky, we can't identify it, and so maybe it's a potential threat, maybe it's aliens, maybe it's the Russians, okay, maybe it's the Chinese. He's not talking about we can't identify it, and so the government just laughs at it and says, oh, that's just a balloon, you're stupid, you don't know what a balloon looks like. You know, the old UFO excuse. It's swamp gas, it's a balloon, etc. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about it being literally a balloon, not because the government's trying to right away the story, change the narrative, but because it's literally a balloon. And we've shot down balloons with multi-$1,000, multi-hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of missiles, millions of dollars. And we don't know how many we've actually shot down. And the thing is, when we've shot these balloons down, or we've shot whatever these things are down, what we're doing is we're wasting resources, we're wasting time, and we're allowing things like actual Chinese spy balloons to float across the entire country. Those we can't shoot down because we were told that those would potentially endanger civilians. But for some reason, it's okay to shoot down these other balloons because we think that they're alien spaceships. Well, we don't want to start a war with the Chinese, but we're okay starting an intergalactic war with aliens from another world or another dimension, perhaps. Is that what I'm to understand? Or is it all part of the disinformation campaign? Because again, when you see that video initially, it might appear to look like something like some kind of maybe even creature. Maybe it reminds you of the movie Nope. And then, oh, actually, it's a Boy Scout balloon. And then it turns out that we spent $500,000 of your money to blow it out of the sky. And in the process of doing that, we probably upset some Boy Scouts. That's not the worst thing we've done to the Boy Scouts. That place is a cesspit of pedophilia and molestation. The last time I checked, I'm sure they teach you some good things too in the Boy Scouts. But we blew up their balloon, $500,000, and in the end, it's just a balloon. And whatever you might think of Sean Kirkpatrick, whatever you might think of government's officials, former officials talking about UFOs, the fact is it's still kind of like the Robertson Panel report. The use of true cases showing first the mystery and then the explanation would be forceful. That's what they're doing. I'm pretty sure that's what they're doing here. Let's look at another one. This one, I think, is the most obvious of all of them. This is the solar balloon. Well, people will say, no, it's a UFO. You know, I'm pretty sure it's actually just a solar balloon. And here's an example of what one of those solar balloons looks like. Just like this. You can already tell it has that classical UFO look and feel to it. It's even slightly reflective. As the balloon goes up into the sky, well, that definitely looks like I could snap a photo of that from a distance and it would appear to be an unidentified flying object. Looks pretty realistic, right? It's the one from Colombia. Now, it turns out it looks realistic because it is real. It's just quite literally a balloon. But looks good. The light being in the sky, the object with some kind of package hanging off the end of it, the object floating up in the sky, maneuvering in a strange way. Those are all balloons, and we've blown some of them up with expensive equipment. Now, there's two important things here. Number one, please don't be a smartass and say, well, are these the same objects that are moving very, very fast? There's a difference between what might be a balloon and some of these other videos where they're moving real, real fast. Okay, that's a good point. There is a difference between a balloon that sits there and is blown out of the sky or something that's floating off in the distance, and that's pretty much all that you see, and something that tends to move fast. However, we also thought the balloons were spaceships. Turns out they're balloons. What are these things that are moving really fast? Could they possibly be something that is just some kind of basically understood sensor or camera, maybe malfunction, issue, or let's say a natural artifact, like when insects fly across, the camera field of vision, and it looks like they're moving super fast. but they're not actually moving as fast as you think that they're moving. Here's an example. The Syrian UAP, it instantly accelerated. It was so fast. That's not a balloon. Then you look at and this is the All Domain Resolution Office, the Defense Visual Information Distribution Service, and it tells you what happens when that particular moment of the video occurs. The sensor stops tracking the area of contrast, causing it to rapidly exit the right side of the frame. In other words, the sensor stopped tracking it, so it started moving real fast. Just like the insects that appear to move really fast. So could it be a tracking issue, a sensor issue? Could it be an insect? Well, in those cases, it tends to be. So don't be a smartass, please, and say, well, those balloons are not the same thing as some of these videos. Balloons don't accelerate that fast. Somebody had actually said to me, that's different. Those balloons are different than these objects that move Mach 20. And I said, Mach 20? Where did you hear that they're moving at Mach 20? Where's that in the documents? Of course, it doesn't exist because people make up their own evidence, or they hear or they see what they want to hear and what they want to see within these reports or within these papers. Okay, now the second thing is, when we're looking at all of this stuff, the idea is that we can't reveal it to the public, right? Because if we actually reveal to the public what we know, which of course we sort of supposedly have, and yet nothing has really come of it one way or the other. But if we really tell the public, like I'm guessing they mean if the president gets up in front of a camera and says, look, there's aliens. That's it. They're not illegal aliens. They're aliens. They're like Hollywood, extraterrestrial, from another world, another dimension, perhaps, aliens. Whatever you saw in Hollywood, that was real. Whatever Steven Spielberg put on the silver screen, it was real. Unlike Schindler's List, Disclosure Day is actually based on something real. It's not a fabricated story. It's real. Like, if they were actually to say that, maybe that's the point in which we would receive the Brookings Report reaction from the public. But honestly, I don't think that we would ever get the kind of reaction out of the public that was suggested back in the 1990s. And besides, this report is how old now? It's over 30 years old. And this Brookings Report is still being used to justify why we really can't disclose all the details. Because we did that, the public would panic. Let's read through some of the Brookings Report. Broadened Horizons. This is at the end of the report, page 215 to page 216, July 20th, 1993. The section is titled Broadened Horizons, Film Watch Division Marketing Plan. It is said that man has an insatiable will to progress, to climb the mountain because it is there, and therefore to explore space to the utmost because he is driven by the nature of his being to do so. I won't read through all of this. I'll read a little bit of each section. In assessing these claims, it should be recalled that there are many societies in which the traditional way of doing things is the proper way of life. Even in our society, with its emphasis on change and on progress, it is common for potentially useful innovations to be blocked by traditional perspectives. Certain ideas related to space activities may even now be contributing in some quarters to changing horizons. For example, under the impetus of the new but frequent claims that space exploration is a fine example of man's most worthy aspiration, the accumulation of knowledge per se, a public attitude favorable to scholarship in general may be generated. Acceptance of long planning periods for space activities and the possibility of international space programs may stimulate attitudes favorable to multinational cooperation and systematic planning in other areas as well. Of course, we fast forward 30 years from this, and nobody really cares that much about space. A couple of liberals who really love space, a couple of conservatives who might be excited about the potential of aliens because, hey, maybe it's God or something. And that's really it. We're not really that interested in space anymore. So we move on to the next section, the implication of a discovery of extraterrestrial life. Recent publicity given to efforts to detect extraterrestrial messages via radio telescope has popularized and legitimized speculations about the impact of such a discovery on human values. It is conceivable that there is semi-intelligent life in some part of our solar system, or highly intelligent life which is not technologically oriented, and many cosmologists and astronomers think it very likely that there is intelligent life in many other solar systems. Well, face-to-face meetings with it will not occur within the next 20 years unless its technology is more advanced than ours, qualifying it to visit Earth. Artifacts left at some point in time by these life forms might possibly be discovered through our space activities on the Moon, Mars, or Venus. If there is any contact made or to be made during the next 20 years, this was in 1993, it would most likely be by radio, which would indicate that these beings had at least equaled our own technological level. Now, this is the Brookings Institute report. You'll notice that what's happening here is they're referring to our own technological level, meaning that the way that we view aliens and extraterrestrials is we're not going to probably be able to discover them or interact with them in any other way in the next 20 or so years unless their technology is way more advanced than ours, because our technology doesn't allow for it. Furthermore, the idea, I've heard this over and over again. Raise your hand. Let me know if you've heard the same thing. I've heard over and over and over again. I did Discovery Channel, History Channel. I've read it in books. I've heard it on late night radio shows. I've heard it over and over and over again. That there's a government report that says we found artifacts on the moon, on Mars, on other planets. You ever heard that claim? Anybody in the chat ever heard that claim? Well, this is where it comes from. And you'll notice, like Carol Rosen, you'll notice, just like Monast, the Canadian journalist who came up with the idea of Project Bluebeam, which was a science fiction story about essentially faking the second coming of Christ, or using Muhammad for the Muslims. It has very little, if anything, to do with aliens. It was a science fiction story inspired by like Jurassic Park and the Space Odyssey. And it was written by a journalist who was a fan of science fiction, like Star Trek. It was not a real project or program, and it has nothing to do with what Carol Rosen was talking about, if she actually worked for von Braun. Two separate things, and one of them isn't even actually about aliens. It's about Jesus and Muhammad. If you don't believe me, okay, go read the actual Project Bluebeam article written by the Canadian journalist. It actually says that in the document because that's what it was about. It's not about aliens. But you might have heard this story. And if you read what I just read, you'll learn where it came from. It came from a think tank in Washington, and did not, with a capital DIDNOT, it did not say they found artifacts on the moon, Mars, and Venus. It said, I'll read it to you again. With face-to-face meetings with it, or while face-to-face meetings with it will not occur within the next 20 years unless its technology is more advanced than ours, qualifying it to visit Earth. Artifacts left at some point in time by these life forms might possibly be discovered through our space activities on the moon, Mars, and Venus, or Venus. If there is any contact to be made during the next 20 years, it would most likely be by radio. You'll notice what's being said here is two very important words. Might possibly. Artifacts left at some point in time by these life forms might possibly be discovered through our space activities on the moon, Mars, and Venus. Now some of the same people that were saying they found artifacts on the moon, they found artifacts on Mars, now the same groups of people that are saying we only have a moon program now to find the artifacts. It's like, well, didn't you say we already found them? Now we're looking to find them for the first time. It just gets really tiring when you have a memory, I guess. Let's go on to read the next section of the Brookings report. Here it says, An individual's reaction to such a radio contact would in part depend on his cultural, religious, and social background, as well as on the actions of those he considers authorities and leaders, and their behavior, in turn, would in part depend on their cultural, social, and religious environment. The discovery would certainly be front page news everywhere. I don't even think that part of the report is accurate in terms of predicting what this might look like in the future, because it kind of is not at the front of every newspaper and every report. It's more like at the front of every tabloid. And the White House, as we'll get to here shortly, has made it into a joke, if it wasn't already, and has turned alien UFO disclosure into illegal alien immigration enforcement. Which, like, theoretically, I'm all for that, but you just kind of misled us and told us that these were going to be something to do with like UFOs, or kind of implied that a little bit. I guess it's our fault for assuming that it might have been anything other than a giant joke, because that's all this subject has been taken for by successive administrations and governments, Congresses, if they've ever even been made aware of it, for generations. So I don't know if the discovery would be front page news everywhere. It'd probably be more like, something about Kim Kardashian on the front page. You get the story about aliens on page 6 or 7. Maybe. It goes on. The degree of political or social repercussions would probably depend on leadership's interpretation of its own role, threats to that role, and national and personal opportunities to take advantage of the disruption or reinforcement of the attitudes and values of others. Since leadership itself might have great need to gauge the direction and intensity of public attitudes to strengthen its own morale, and for decision-making purposes, it would be most advantageous to have more to go on than personal opinions about the opinions of the public and other leadership groups. Now, you'll notice that just like the paragraph before it, where we've been told by the UFO mythologists they found artifacts on the moon, Mars, and Venus. And then you read the actual report from the Brookings Institute, and it says, as an example, maybe we could possibly find these things in these places. So it turns out the UFO narrative, the mythology, was kind of off about what the report actually said. Big surprise. You read the next paragraph, and like the one previous, remember when we've been told by the Discovery Channel, the History Channel, the UFO conferences, and a bunch of other UFO sources of information from magazines to books? Remember when we were kind of led to believe that the report said, if they disclose, society will collapse, the church will explode, and we'll all just become atheists? And then it turns out that's actually not what the report says. It explicitly says, as I'll read it to you again, an individual's reaction to such a radio contact, specifically focused on radio contact, not anything else, would in part depend on his cultural, religious, and social background, as well as on the actions of those he considers authorities and leaders, and their behavior in turn would in part kind of like a real standard observation of how any groundbreaking, earth-shattering information might be approached, might be looked at. I mean, really, it's kind of the same thing with learning about history. It depends on your cultural, religious, and social background. The same thing goes for a lot of things in the world. Standard science, everything from abortion to IVF therapy. It all depends how you view it, depends on your cultural, religious, and social background. There's nothing unique about that as it applies to UFOs, UAPs, or aliens, or whatever we assume them to be or not be. And it does not say that society would collapse. So you'll learn that what's happening here is, once again, the public being misled, not in this case by the government, but in this case by some lovely people who have decided to, for money or for their own delusions, mislead the public on the subject. Hermit Ventures in the chat brings up an interesting point. The U.S. has to announce it. Why? I'd like to go a step further, and I'd like to ask, why does the U.S. have to be the only country to announce it? Like, for example, if, let's say, Vladimir Putin said, yes, aliens are real, how would we handle that? I actually think that we would handle that worse than just the existence of aliens, or like the idea that they're real. I think we'd handle it worse. You can't trust the Russians. You can't trust Putin. He's lying about the aliens. But I can trust my government to tell me the truth when the people that are demanding them to tell me the truth and then getting all excited when they release some video that was already released or some document that's already been released. Those are the same people that are like, yeah, the government's disclosing. It's like, aren't those the same people that you've accused of lying and stealing and killing? Which is why it doesn't make any sense that everybody from Joe Rogan to Dan Farr to Anna Paulina Luna are saying, let's give these people that we believe have murdered to cover up the truth, let's give them amnesty. That sounds like a good idea, right? Murderers and thieves and psychopaths, let's give them amnesty for just all the potential and actual crimes that they may have or did actually commit. Let's give them amnesty. That makes sense. Well, you want the quote truth so bad that you're willing to just give murderers and thieves and psychopaths a free pass. You're also assuming that a bunch of murderers and thieves and psychopaths would be willing to give up their power and money to do the right thing, which I'm pretty sure if they wanted to do the right thing, they wouldn't be murderers and thieves and psychopaths. And for the record, when I say murderers and thieves and psychopaths, I'm just making that general statement as per how people see the black budget programs. They murder to keep the secrets. You know, they steal people's money. They have no conscience. They don't care. Free energy or advanced technology or whatever the case might be. You're assuming that those people would want to give up all. I mean, I feel like I don't feel like I'm a psychopath, but if you gave me unlimited money and a different mindset and you put me into some black program and you told me that no one can ever prosecute you, you're totally protected, just work on this and you can have anything in the world you want. I mean, assuming that's how it actually goes, I feel like that's a pretty good gig. That, of course, is assuming that's how it goes. I can't imagine that they keep people enslaved doing this work. You've seen the so-called missing scientists that all seem to at the same time, or some of them at the same time, some of them died, some of them at the same, well, some of them weren't even scientists, but some of them at the same time just disappeared, wiped their phones and vanished in front of their families. Clearly they're committed to something, or maybe their families have been threatened and they were absorbed into these programs. I'm pretty sure that black programs exist. I know that they do because they were used to build the F-117 and the SR-71, among other craft. I know that they exist. I know that things are on a need-to-know basis. I know that we've had things like the Manhattan Project, which are need-to-know and extremely compartmentalized. I know that's all real. But just because something's secret doesn't necessarily mean that it has anything to do with aliens. Just because something's secret doesn't necessarily mean it has anything to do with spaceships. I thought that was understood. It's like when I've seen everybody from Carrie Cassidy to just a dime a dozen UFO documentarians go to Area 51. I've been there myself. I've been to Rachel probably half a dozen or so times. And I drove up to the Area 51 gate, the external outer gate, one time. When I got up there, they had those white vehicles. They turned. I didn't get close to the line because I wasn't trying to be shot that day. But I did get within a couple of steps of it just to look. And I turned around, got back in the car and left. Well, I took a few pictures, but then I left. And when I see the Carrie Cassidys and others do this kind of thing where they'll go out there. I don't know when the last time she did it, but I know that she did it a long, long time ago for a movie or TV show or something she was working on. But they go out there and they'll say, why do they need all this security? They're definitely covering something up. yeah, it's a highly secretive military installation that isn't so secret anymore. And regardless of what they're working on there, it's top secret and it's the military. And just because they have guys with guns doesn't mean that they're covering for alien spaceships. Like, it's a military installation. This is something that just baffles me. So I'm supposed to just, I guess, assume that because someone has a gun, they're protecting alien cargo or they're protecting alien bodies. So the mall cop with like a baton or a taser, there's aliens in the mall or under the mall. The local police department, the sheriff has a gun and a shotgun probably in his car. Is the local police department covering up alien life? It's a military installation. Of course they have guns. Of course you can't run across. If we run across the line, they'll detain us and maybe shoot us. What are they covering up? Who's going to tell them? I think that's kind of how all military installations work. I think if you run across the line, I think that they detain you and you might get shot. Or the idiots that go and try to ask, like yell out to the white vehicled private security, what do you know about aliens? I don't think they know anything about aliens. I bet you they're sitting in those vehicles with the AC blasting and they're probably doing crossword puzzles. Now they're probably watching things on YouTube and they probably don't know anything about aliens. What are they covering up in there? I don't know. It's a military base. All kinds of things. I've been to MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa. I was there when I was in Civil Air Patrol. I was there for air shows. I was there for a tour. I've been to MacDill Air Force Base a lot. And, no matter how many times I've been there, they always seem to have armed security because it's a military installation. Like when I saw the F-117 one time. I saw a B-2. They had one on the ground, the F-117 on the ground, and a B-2 fly over. And you could see it, but they wouldn't let you see the back of it. They had it halfway inside of a hangar. You could see the front, but you couldn't see the back because it was considered still super top secret. But they let you see the front. A B-2 flying over is ominous. It's very, very scary, even though it's an air show. But you see the front of the F-117, and I'll never forget looking at it because I used to have a little metal toy of it. And I looked at it, and I remember these very, very armed security guards on both sides. And that was because it was a very, very sensitive and halfway somewhat secretive piece of military equipment. And they didn't want people running up to it and touching it and jumping on it and taking pictures of it. Off limits. Was that because the F-117 is an alien spaceship? Is it also not possible that if you take off all the regulations, good or bad regulations, and you put unlimited money into something, and you tell people, look, money's not an object, the law's not an object, nothing done here, nothing can be considered illegal or immoral. Here's an unlimited budget. I want you to build the most advanced piece of technology that you can fathom. I want a plane, I want a gun, I want something. I'm pretty sure that you probably would come up with something that was, in terms of the context of the F-117 or the SR-71, something that did look a lot more alien. Because if you're giving someone free reign and free money, unlimited resources, and no regulation or oversight, they probably are going to come up with something that is otherworldly. And you know how I know that? I know that because I want you to just think about computers. Think about like a standard PC. And whatever you think about PC, there's some good PCs, but I personally always had really crappy PCs when I was a kid, and they never ever really worked. And then I was introduced to a Mac. You might not like Macs. I've heard people say you can't compute on fruit. That's okay. But what I'm telling you is that at the very least, the Mac is definitely built better than the PCs I've had, most PCs. And it seems to function better. If I didn't know better, I would think that Steve Jobs was an alien and these computers were alien technology. Because for what I do, they are much better pieces of equipment than a standard PC. And they're much different than a standard PC, right? You can't play with these things like you can a PC. Some people obviously see that as a downside. But the Mac, I'm pretty sure, was made by humans. It was inspired by Japanese aesthetics. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't alien technology. It was, on the other hand, named after the apple that was bitten in the Garden of Eden. And there's a lot of occultism within the Mac story. And within the Windows story too, because the original Windows logo is basically it's the shamanic window into the other world. I think it's like in southern France. It looks like Microsoft window logos painted on the caves dating back tens of thousands of years. Anyway, that's a subject that's in my book, Garden of Hallucinations. You get a copy at tstradio.info. The point of what I'm getting at here is that look at the difference between like an old PC and a MacBook. And whether you like Mac or not, there's clearly a difference in design and there's clearly a difference in function, one that is so different and so vast that it appears to be alien. And besides, these MacBooks are also designed so it's just like all one piece. You can't take it apart like a PC. And so if it's all one piece, that kind of sounds like how the UFOs are designed, all one piece. They're really advanced. There's no rivets. Well, we have things on Earth that are advanced enough that there's no rivets in my computer. There really aren't. I don't think there's even any screws that I can access, maybe one or two on the back. These things are solid. You can't really get into them unless you know exactly what you're doing. So it's almost like the Mac itself is a flying saucer. This is a silly example, maybe it's a good example, but it's an important example nonetheless. And I hope it gives you some contrast to understand that if you give someone unlimited money, no regulation, no oversight, or even if you have some regulation and you have unlimited but still somewhat limited money, if you have a good enough idea, you can transform the world. And aliens do not need to be involved. That's just the bottom line. So once again, the Brookings report does not say that we found some kind of artifacts on the moon or Mars. It says artifacts may have been left at some point by life forms, might possibly be discovered through our space activities on the moon, Mars, or Venus. I don't think we're going to Venus anytime soon. It also does not say that religions in the whole world would collapse. It refers to radio contact and how people react to that based on cultural, religious, and social backgrounds. Now, there's more to this report. You can read more. The part about implications of man in space, that's about the end of the document there. And that's what it actually says. So what we've learned tonight thus far is that the Robertson Panel report from 1953 is essentially at work, still active. The policy of the intelligence community and military is still active today. They're showing us things that look wild, and then they can actually describe what they are later. And so what happens is the implication is the whole narrative is the whole story is debunked. That's an old policy from the 50s about how they handle these things. That's still active. The Brookings report, there's going to be mass panic. There's going to be, the end of the world. Religions will collapse. The whole thing's going to fall apart if we disclose, if we tell people what's happening for real. And so you want evidence and proof that that's still the official policy? That narrative isn't even based on the actual report. Let's listen to Ross Coulthart on News Nation repeating the same line from the Brookings Institute.
There's a lot of speculation, I'm hearing it from people inside the administration, that the Trump administration is indeed soliciting advice about how to tell the public that we're not alone. There are consultations taking place with spiritual leaders. I'm now able to confirm that. There was some speculation a couple of weeks ago about a group of pastors, but it turned out that wasn't directly related to the White House. But there are religious leaders that have been consulted by the White House. I'm aware of people in the administration who've reached out. I've actually spoken to people myself who've asked what I think would be the, quote, ontological shock for the public. And I've told them that, frankly, I think the biggest shock for the public would be the sense of a betrayal of trust if the government doesn't follow through and tell the whole story. There's a lot of speculation.
Oh, Ross Goldhart, there's going to be a falling apart of trust if the government doesn't tell the whole story. Yeah, because we trust the government so much now. They told us the whole truth about JFK and the whole truth about Epstein, the whole truth about all of it, Iran and the peace deal that's here today, gone tomorrow, here again the next day, and gone again the next day after that. Yeah, because trust in the government is at an all-time high. And if we don't tell them, the public, about these UFOs, they're not going to trust us anymore. Is this guy high? What is Ross Coldhart drinking, smoking, injecting, snorting, etc., that he can make such a ridiculous statement like that and people still take him seriously? He has to be on some kind, maybe he's just high on his own self-importance. And by the way, that term that he used in this video is a narrative that's being spun by Anna Paulina Luna and all of the others. It's another talking point. And that term, just like mass, what was that term that Robert Malone used one day on Alex Jones? Was it mass formation psychosis? I'll never forget this. I went to a laundromat. It must have been within a day of that interview coming out. And I had my Hillary for Prison shirt on because I don't like politics, but I still think that's funny. Right, George Bush as well in the back really confuses people. But I had my Hillary for Prison shirt, and I got out of the car, and this guy sees it. I start talking to him. He's like, he said, I'm an info warrior. I said, well, I listen to Alex. I know some people that have been on there. I don't consider myself an info warrior, which I'm sure confused him because I had a Hillary for Prison shirt on. And within a couple of minutes, we had this little conversation. I thought I maybe made a new friend. And then he says, it's like mass formation psychosis. I said, where'd you hear that at? Where'd you hear mass formation psychosis? Oh, it was that guy, the vaccine guy, he said it. I said, Robert Malone? He said, yeah, Robert Malone, mass formation. I said, I don't believe that's a real term. I think he made that up. Why are people just, even if he didn't, why are people repeating this term? Do you not think for yourself? Of course, that destroyed any potential friendship because I just can't stand when CNN or Fox News says something and a bunch of people repeat it and regurgitate it. I also can't stand when InfoWars or News Nation says something or they hear something on News Nation or InfoWars and they start repeating it. It's just like CNN and Fox News. I don't care how old you are. It's the same exact kind of reaction. And that reaction is based on you not thinking for yourself and having to learn talking points from other people. It's really irritating. And what Ross Coldhart says in this video is ontological shock. But see, he's got an accent, so he says ontological shock. And people are like, oh, what's ontological shock? They're consulting the religious officials about how to disclose. No, they're not. No, they're not. There was a bunch of pastors, a bunch of con men a couple of weeks ago who said this was happening. That's not what happened. The president himself isn't even religious, so I'm not even sure why would the president be consulting religious officials. Only 60% of the country is really Christian. I don't think the Muslims have much of an issue with the aliens. The Jews definitely don't have an issue with the aliens because they've positioned them as their gods. They're chosen. That means that the gods are here to help them defeat the rest of their enemies. So it's really the Christians that have an issue with it, and they're barely half the population. And the president's not even Christian. So why are we consulting religious officials? And in a country that has something, 50 to 60% Christian, I think it's like 61%, and maybe I read 58% at one point. It's decreasing. They're not all Catholic. So you're consulting every religious official? None of it makes any sense. And besides that, we go back to Brookings, because what he is saying, what Ross Coulthart is saying here, is taking a line directly from the mythos of the Brookings Institute report. The reaction to radio contact, or reaction as it's been later misrepresented, the reaction to the evidence of the presence of alien life, would depend on cultural, religious, and social backgrounds. That's what Ross Coulthart is referencing here. Which means that from the White House release, DOJ, FBI, all the agencies kind of involved in this, maybe not so much the DOJ, but the FBI, NASA, the Department of War, all these agencies that are involved in this are just repeating the same talking points from the Robertson panel report, showing us things that look pretty interesting, and then saying, actually, we have an explanation for them. That is literally the Robertson panel report of the intelligence community and the military dating back to 1953. And when Ross Coulthart is on TV saying, look, they're consulting with religious officials to see how they should disclose, that comes directly out of not just the Brookings Institute report, but the narrative and the mythos around it. So in other words, there's a couple of groups of people, and then there's my very strange point of view on this. I don't agree with the people that believe that this is disclosure by any definition. I don't agree with the people that think it's all just some big joke. And by joke, I don't mean like the way it's handled. I mean like the subject is a joke. The subject is not a joke. There's something very real. It might have to do with consciousness. It might have to do with something more spiritual. Maybe that is the same as consciousness. It might have to do with something interdimensional. It might have to do with something extra. I really don't know, but there's something there, and it tends to change with time. It probably has a lot to do with psychology. I'm the kind of person that looks at this and says, there's something there. I think both sides are wrong. And I think that the entire narrative is being spun based on the mythology of the Brookings Institute report and based on what is the Robertson panel report from 1953, where that is, if you read it, the actual very clear, I think, policy that is still being carried out in 2026. And I don't really think it's disputable. I think that what you read in that document can just be compared to all of these incredible videos that can actually be described or explained in a few minutes. I guess it wasn't that important. I guess it wasn't that interesting. I guess it wasn't really that otherworldly, because you can explain it so easily, which means that it's still that policy from 1953. Now that we've gotten through those details, let's shift gears and look at what recently has been posted by the White House, by the Department of Homeland Security, and what's on the new website that we thought, well, I didn't think this, but others thought was going to be proof of alien life. I guess, well, we got fooled again. Well, some people got fooled again. Here is the White House, aliens.gov. Remember the whole story recently? The government registered aliens.gov. Now, my insiders say that they're about to disclose the presence of extraterrestrials, and it turns out alien.gov is an immigration site, an illegal immigration site. Really cheesy propaganda, really, is actually what it is. Just terrible, terrible trolling. The White House posted this. For those of you who can't see it, I'll read it. It just says, they walk among us. That's it. Aliens.gov. It has a link. And there's a video of what looks like the border wall, a UFO, some saguaro cactuses, and someone running. That would be your illegal. And the UFO picking them up with the tractor beam, carrying them back across the wall, and then dumping them in what I assume is Mexico. That has got to be the dumbest piece of propaganda since the White House spliced together SpongeBob when he was a superhero and he had fast, they call him the Quickster, and he ran really fast. He says, you want to see me run to that rock and back? You want to see me do it again? And they cut that with bombs killing people in Iran. Remember that? And it was like explosion, blow up a school full of children, and then SpongeBob comes on and says, "You want to see me do it again?" And then there's another bomb that goes off. Just awful, horrible propaganda. Awful. That's why people like those Iranian Lego videos, because they're actually creative and they actually teach you something. They're actually, honest. Our propaganda is not even good anymore. And who likes this? Like, watch this video again for those of you watching with the YMCA song in the back. I play it again, but I might get flagged on the YouTube stream for it. Or look at it a third time. I mean, that, I think, is the definition of, what do they call it? AI slop. I think that's AI slop. It is awful. And you know who I think likes that? Unfortunately, a lot of our listeners fall into this category, and I hope that you know that I don't mean you. But I think, who actually likes that? It's just a bunch of like boomers, I think. It's a bunch of people from the boomer generation. They don't know how any of this stuff works. And so there's definitely people like that making it. And this is their idea of a joke. This is their idea. They don't care about aliens or UFOs, whatever the reason is. And you might say, well, they care about illegal immigrants. Not really. If they did, we would have closed the loopholes and we would have closed the border and we would have solved the problem. It's not really that hard to do. Look, if the Germans did it in the 1930s within a matter really of a couple of months to a couple of years, this president has had how many years to do this? 4, 5, 6 years, 8 total, and nothing has really changed except they've manipulated numbers. It really is just boomer slop. And I don't like using that term. I don't know why I don't like using it. I don't like using it, but it's boomer slop. But it's also, I think, slop for a bunch of younger conservative people that have been brainwashed by like a Ben Shapiro running Turning Point USA kind of a thing. Kids that actually could have had a positive direction, but after Charlie Kirk died, Turning Point USA turned to driving these kids into this kind of propaganda so that they can get them to go fight and die for Israel in a bunch of foreign wars. I think that's what it was. Let me see if I can find that SpongeBob propaganda. SpongeBob, White House, Iran propaganda video. Because if you haven't seen this, wow, it is awful. We have played those Iranian videos on the show here before. Okay, I think that this is the one. Yeah, this is the one. This is our propaganda. Let me pull this up for you so you can see it. This is the level of American propaganda. We're so bad at propaganda now. We used to be really good at it. We can't even do propaganda well. Here's the official White House page. And here's the video.
You want to see me do it again? You want to see me do it again? You want to see me do it again?
What exactly is that? I don't know what that is, or what did I just watch? What was that? Anybody have any idea what that was? Just a total pile of slop and trash. And we don't even have good propaganda. And this video of this illegal alien abduction UFO thing, this is also the same level of slop. The same people that made that SpongeBob video are the same people that made this UFO video. I guarantee it. If it ain't the same people, it's the same type of people, because this is just awful. Here's another one. Homeland Security. They walk among us. Now, you would think that maybe what's happening here is it's just a clever kind of play on words. Well, if we weren't talking about UFO disclosure, if we weren't talking about disclosure of, the UFO files, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, and this was just kind of out of the blue, just out of nowhere, randomly, I would be a lot more, or I should say, a lot less critical of it, a lot more willing to accept that, okay, maybe it's just a joke. But when you release aliens.gov, when you publish what I'm about to show you on that website, and you do that in the middle, like the same week, you're supposedly releasing UFO files that have never been seen before, then that's why I think a lot of other people have a problem with it, because clearly you're not taking this issue seriously. Clearly you think it's a joke, and clearly you're leveraging some of the interest in the subject to drive people's attention to the immigration issue. Which, like, sure, yeah, immigration illegally, it's illegal immigration, that's a big issue, but that maybe could be kept separate. You shouldn't mix the two together. This is not good. I'll show you that website in just a moment. Here's another White House post. This one says, "Are you listening?" Why now, and maybe it always has been, but why exactly if you're asking what that was, I have no idea what that was. Why exactly are government official statements now basically like movie teasers? We're cutting SpongeBob together with illegal war, or with just war in general. Want to see me do it again? Which really you could just have like Iraq, want to see me do it again? Afghanistan, want to see me do it again? Syria, Libya, Lebanon, Iran, etc., etc., etc. Or the CIA's overthrowing of various South American countries. Want to see me do it again? That would actually be funny. So there's that. Then you have whatever this is. It's like a teaser trailer. Of course, people are analyzing it. If you listen to it really closely, they say disclosure in it. I don't know, and I don't care. It's actually aliens talking in it. I'm sorry, there's aliens talking in it? How do you know what an alien sounds like? You mean like a Hollywood alien? What are you talking about? I think you actually would probably see, you really probably would see more truth in a Steven Spielberg trailer, not even the movie, but a Steven Spielberg trailer, than you would in whatever the White House is releasing. And maybe I've kind of jokingly speculated about this. Maybe Disclosure Day is the real disclosure, or maybe it's closer to the truth. I don't actually believe that fully, but just by the nature of what we've seen with the trailer for this movie compared to what the White House has shown us, you might actually get more, quote, truth in the film. Now, I can't play the whole trailer, I don't think, because this isn't like a movie channel on YouTube. I can play you the audio, of course, but I'll show you the trailer page here. And for the record, for anybody who's watching the video and they're having an issue with maybe the video is choppy or the audio is choppy, this is not our show. This is just a free thing we do on Fridays. This show, however, will have crystal clear, perfect audio in the actual archive. So you'll have to go to the archive if you want to listen to the show, if there are issues where some of you are listening. Sometimes it's on my end, sometimes it's on your end. I am broadcasting from Tokyo, so I'm not in your backyard. It's amazing we could even do this to begin with. So here's the Disclosure Day trailer. We'll zoom in on this so you can see it. I'm not going to play the whole thing here, the video, but I'll play the whole audio for you, because Steven Spielberg is talking within this trailer.
I can see them. I am much more inclined now than I was when I made Close Encounters to really believe that we're not the only intelligent civilization in the universe.
What did you steal?
Secrets. People have a right to know the truth. This is a story about us, all of us,
Good morning, Kansas City.
up against the most extraordinary event in human history.
What's happening to me? I'm frightened. I'm frightened out of my wits.
You don't need to be. You have someone else.
Daniel Keller,
Who is this?
do not go back to the house. They found you. I don't know who you are, but they're gonna kill you.
The human race cannot accept what we know. We need to stop it any way we can.
What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing?
This 79-year cover-up of the truth has to end.
We're interrupting our coverage.
How will disclosure change us? I believe for the better. It will remind us of our capacity for empathy and that there is something bigger out there than just ourselves.
You only get to know your purpose is to go back to where it all
So am I to understand that since this movie comes out on the 12th of June, am I to understand that this movie just happened to be made and
Wouldn't it be wonderful if all of this turned out to be true?
set to be released?
Wouldn't it be wonderful for people to know all of this is true?
Right around the time in which the federal government is discussing the subject of, quote, disclosure. Right around the time in which there's going to be yet another meeting of people, the same cast of characters on Capitol Hill, demanding more UFO disclosure. I'm supposed to believe that this is all just a big coincidence. I don't know who's using who. I don't know if this whole disclosure push at Congress, this whole disclosure push in some of the media is really just an extended budget of Spielberg's Disclosure Day, which honestly, I kind of believe that to a certain extent. Or if it's just conveniently aligned what's happening in Congress with this movie because our entire country is its perception of reality on, primarily, Spielbergish Hollywood, Jewish Hollywood. It pretty much bases its concept of reality on whatever the church tells it and whatever Hollywood tells it. So there's a healthy mix of government and Hollywood already in pretty much everything that the public believes. So it really wouldn't surprise me if the Pentagon worked together, because we learned this in film school when I was in film school. The Pentagon works, of course, with directors, especially directors and producers, and to put things together, especially if they're using military equipment or talking about the military or the Pentagon or the U.S. government in some way. Spielberg, of course, has been around for absolutely ever. And Spielberg is one of the most famous directors in the world. I don't particularly think he's the best, but they always put him up there as like the best director ever. I don't necessarily think that's true at all. But there's just too much of a crossover. There's too much of maybe some people are using the date of the movie to organize their disclosure talk. But it seems like a lot of that talk is also maybe just an extended push for let's go see the movie. I don't know what's going on here, but I don't buy it. Although I will say, the whole point of playing this, I'll play this last part again where he's speaking. I think that you probably will actually get more truth with this movie than you've gotten from the White House.
So wouldn't it be wonderful if all of this turned out to be true? I'm now thinking, wouldn't it be wonderful for people to know all of this is true?
So I'm not necessarily excited to see this movie, but I will see it because I consider it to kind of be my job. And I will watch it with an open mind. And I can already tell you from the trailer that I think it's probably going to be better than what the White House has shown us. So you see that, and then go back to the White House version of Alien Disclosure, which is just again, it's this video here, which is just some AI slop of some guy being picked up and thrown back over the border wall. So like, yeah, I don't like Spielberg, but I'm pretty sure that Disclosure Day is going to be a lot better than whatever nonsense this was that the White House just put out. I'm pretty sure. I can't say 100%, but I'm pretty sure. Here's another one. The White House also posted this one. This is for those of you who can't see it, it appears to be a crop circle. It just says loading. The helicopter flying over. Yeah, total garbage. Absolute trash. Absolute garbage. Let's go to that website and let's actually see what it says, and then we'll play a clip of the president talking about the subject, which has, of course, made people, oh my God, very excited. The president said it's just that the UFO disclosure is going so well. It's amazing. And then you actually listen. It's not, he has no idea what he's talking about. He's not disclosing anything. But here's the website. This is aliens, whitehouse.gov. This is like aliens, aliens.gov. Go to the link here. Aliens.gov. They walk among us. Aliens.gov. It takes you here to the White House. And it says they walk among us. You can see that's where I got the show promo for tonight. I will take the comments down just for a moment so you can see this fully. For those of you who can't see it, it's a Star Wars-like background with a green turquoise illuminated text that says they walk among us. And then it says in green text, I'll read it all to you because there's not a lot. For 60 years, the U.S. government has kept a closely guarded secret. Aliens have been walking among us, living in our neighborhoods and interacting with us in our daily lives. They've shopped in the same stores, attended the same classes as our children, and lived seemingly normal human existences. With one exception, they do not belong here. Millions arrived under the cover of darkness and embedded themselves directly into our society. Countless presidents, congressmen, and senior officials knew exactly what was happening. Instead of protecting American citizens, they chose to cover it up and even accelerate the invasion. Until one man finally had the courage to tell the truth. We'll get to that in a second. Bold, unapologetic, and unafraid. President Trump was the first to call out the real danger aliens pose to every American family, every community, and the future of our nation. The truth is no longer out there. It is right here, right now. So here's a couple of problems with this Star Wars-like introduction to another piece of trash slop propaganda, and that is that the president is not the first to call out the danger of illegal immigration. In fact, I'm pretty sure that even Obama had done that at one point or another. He's not the first president to do that. Number two, the last line, the truth is no longer out there, of course, referencing the X-Files. It's right here, meaning that the truth of what you think this is or what you think this implies, there's nothing to it. The real truth is this immigration issue, and that's what we need to solve. And there actually is irony in this because, honestly, the immigration issue, I think, is probably more important than the alien issue at this point. I do. Maybe we could spend that $500,000 we used to shoot that balloon down, and we could spend it on, I don't know, border security. Or maybe we could just, I don't know, pay some attorneys to go through all the legal code and close the loopholes that we allow to remain open, that allow people to come here with immunity. Maybe we could do that. You know, maybe we could stop giving free handouts to people. Maybe we could just do like what most countries do when there's a border issue. You just round people up and you deport them. I love how the racism thing just doesn't really work here in Japan. There's a story that just has been remaking the rounds over and over and over again. It's about an Indian guy who ran a restaurant in Tokyo, And he's been here for 30 years. His kids speak Japanese. He doesn't really know anything else. His kids are like, they're from here. I don't think they're even from India. At least this is the story that's been painted. And the government cracked down on visas. And so he's getting the boot. Him and his kids are getting the boot. And I keep seeing that story. It's the only one that's being told, which makes me think that it's just it's a stage thing, or this guy made a mistake and didn't fill out paperwork for years, and that's why he's being deported. It's not because he's Indian. There's probably some reason like that. And so I keep seeing this story, but every time these publications try to paint it as like, well, the Japanese are racist or something, like virtually the entire, I think, establishment over here just says, no, you broke law, get out. There really isn't a lot of that liberal think or a lot of the same kind of political, I mean, there is political separation here, of course, but it's not the same kind of political nonsense we have in the US. Maybe it's just not as bad. It's just like generally recognized, well, you broke the law, get out. And the racism thing just doesn't work as much. You're racist, you're white supremacist. Well, they're not white, so they're more like yellow Asians. So it's not really white supremacy. So get out. And that's usually what happens in these cases. It's usually somebody that didn't file the right paperwork, and then they're a victim, and then they have to leave, and it's all just a big victimhood show. And it turns out if they would have just filed the paperwork, then everything would have been okay. It's like there's a couple, the same thing happened in Los Angeles, this couple that lived in LA for 30 years. Same type of a story. And they're like, we've lived here for 30 years. They can't kick us out and send us to Mexico or wherever. I think they were from Mexico. It's like, well, you lived here for 30. You didn't think to bother, and you didn't bother in 30 years to get the right paperwork. That's on you. That's not anybody else's fault except you. So it is a big problem. Maybe we could use some of that money we otherwise have blown on blowing things up that were just balloons. We could use that to fix the immigration issue. But of course, this term is half over, and nothing really has been done. It's just a bunch of propaganda, and it's bad propaganda at that, and nothing has really changed. And it's just the same story, business as usual. I want to refer you to two stories that I've referenced on this show. I referenced them on the Tuesday show this week, 51st disclosure dates, a promo that I'm very happy with Elizondo in there with the UFOs and Uncle Sam. Crazy UFO believing Pentagon bosses missed spycraft for years. This is written for the New York Post by Todd Farley and Stephen Greenstreet. And it's a really great article because it's explaining the premise of how I started the show off tonight. And that is that because we have spent all of this time and effort looking for aliens, we've allowed actual threats to get through. We've allowed spy balloons from other countries to gather data on us while we've been shooting down Boy Scout balloons. So you might want to go and read that article. It's a good read. Here's another one from the Scientific American, somewhat similar. This is Sean Kirkpatrick. This is a really good article. Here's what I learned as the U.S. government's UFO hunter. And what he learned as the government's UFO hunter is that, well, there's no evidence. There's only allegations repeated by the UFO claim advocates. Which takes us back to this Daily Mail article, which says UFO and alien evidence to take center stage on Capitol Hill in days. If I had a penny for every time I've heard this, I would be a very rich man. If I had a half a penny, I'd be a really rich man. Do you know how many times I've heard that in my lifetime doing this professionally? I've heard it more times than I could count. I've heard it so many times that I've just become numb to it. You know what it's like? It's like when you're with somebody, they're a friend, a family member, or maybe you're in a relationship with someone and they got a drug problem or they got an alcohol problem. They got some kind of addictive problem. And the first or second, maybe the third time they say, you know, I'm gonna get clean. And then they don't. So give them a second chance, third chance, fourth. By the fifth or sixth chance, if you've given them that many chances, it's on you. You say, well, I don't really think you're going to change. And the next time they tell you, I am going to get off these drugs, or I'm not going to drink as much, or whatever the case is, you say, sure, whatever. And they, well, you don't trust me? Well, no, I don't, because you've told me this 5 or 6 other times and you've never done it. So I don't trust you. I don't believe you. If you do it, great, good for you, but I can't trust you because you've lied to me. And that's what this disclosure subject really is. That's why I called our recent show 51st Disclosure Dates, because basically what is happening is every time Uncle Sam wakes up, he forgets. Just like Drew Barrymore in that movie. Every time he wakes up, he forgets. This is Uncle Sam. Every time Uncle Sam wakes up, he forgets. And Louis Elizondo is there to sing him a song and teach him about the aliens, about chandeliers and irrigation circles. And then when Uncle Sam goes to sleep, he forgets about all the fraud and all the lie and all the facts that we're supposed to get tomorrow and the next day. And then he wakes up again, and Elizondo's there to sing him back to sleep. Sing him and lull him back into a sense of, we're going to get the disclosure. And then Uncle Sam goes back to sleep and he forgets all about it. He wakes up and who's this strange man in my bed? And it's Elizondo with a ukulele singing a song, telling about how the UFOs are real. And then he goes back to sleep and forgets it and has to go every single day, go through the same process Uncle Sam does of having to be reinformed of the subject. It's the same story every single day. It's either 51st dates or it's like Groundhog Day. Someone in the chat said Groundhog Day. It is like Groundhog Day. Every day I wake up, I got Bill Murray. We should make a movie, a UFO movie with Bill Murray. Every day he wakes up, it's the same exact story. He's got to live it. He knows it's not true. He knows that something's wrong eventually, but he has to keep living it. There's something wrong here, folks. Something's not right. Someone's being lied to. You can get more truth from a Steven Spielberg movie, a subversive Jewish producer who has made fictitious movies over and over again. You can get more truth from that than you can from the White House. I mean, really, honestly, if you really want to know about what these UFOs that we keep seeing are, I mean, there's more truth than 909 sich Luftballons. There's more truth in that song than there is, because it's mostly 909 sich Balloons. There's a whole bunch of them. And we're shooting them down, wasting money, wasting time. The thing is, when people hear that, well, what about the ones that aren't balloons? Okay, what about the ones that aren't insects? What about the ones that aren't camera issues or sensor issues? So you're saying you don't believe in the aliens? Well, this isn't an issue of belief or skepticism. It's an issue of evidence. And there is something out there. I want you to understand that tonight's show, when I reference the Robertson Panel report or the Brookings Institute report, the think tank, I'm not saying I, quote, don't believe. What I'm saying is there is something there. The government as a whole doesn't know, but there are elements of the government that do know. They're not sure what it is. And so they're making sure that the public does not find out before they do. The things that they might understand, they're making sure the public does not understand them. This tells me that it's about a lot more than energy, and it's about a lot more than religion. There's something fundamental here to the basis of like what maybe the purpose of life is, or what consciousness is. Maybe there's something far more than just mechanical abduction-like elements to the UFO issue. Perhaps it's a lot more than just what everybody kind of assumes it is. The White House published this. They show you how many encounters they have, and then they show you an alien arrest map. Again, this might be kind of comical or clever if it wasn't done in the middle of so-called UFO alien disclosure. It might kind of be clever. But if you're going to do this the same week that you release more files, that's kind of a problem. Clearly, you don't take the subject seriously. Clearly, it's all a big joke. Let's listen to what the president had to say about this subject.
We're releasing a lot of information having to do with extraterrestrial,
yes.
Things, and
yes, they're extraterrestrial. They're tarantula UFOs. Extraterrantulas. They're actually spider aliens. He misspoke. Maybe Carrie Cassidy was right, and so were all those drunk, high, psychotic super soldiers she interviewed that talked about fighting spiders on Mars.
People are information having to do with extraterrestrial things, and people are totally fascinated by it. It's amazing. I wasn't sure if they would enjoy it. It's literally trending #1. Can you believe it? So a lot of people out there are like it, but we're releasing all of that information.
No, they're not really releasing all that information because most of what they've released has already been released. Most of what they released is already known, and most of what they've released can easily be identified, and it's all part of the same policy that was enacted back in 1953. Nothing much has changed, I don't think. Here's another Daily Mail article that just came out. Secret White House plan for disclosure of alien life leaked. Trump insiders have told me they fear mass panic as UFO videos are released, according to Chris Sharp. Oh, would that kind of be, again, like that report we looked at earlier? Mass fear, mass panic. Isn't that's what this is, right? That's what this Brookings Institute report is, right? That's what this Brookings Institute report is. That's what this narrative has been in the UFO community for forever. Look at that. Looks like the Daily Mail, this opinion piece, repeating the same talking point that Ross Coldhart was repeating that I played earlier for you. So it looks like it's all just business as usual and nothing much has changed. Or as much as things change, they stay the same. Here's Brett Feddersen, former White House National Security Council Director of Aviation Security, says UFOs not made by human beings.
Brett Feddersen's a former White House National Security Council Director of Aviation Security, and this is Feddersen's first
For the record, the guy speaking, Jesse Walters, makes me want to throw up.
Interview since the age of disclosure. Brett, you mentioned that this keeps you up at night. Tell us why.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jesse. The reason it does is twofold. One is the fact that this type of technology is not man-made. It's nothing that we can build or have built or are using
So apparently we cannot inflate balloons
out there. And the fact that we're seeing it so prevalently on a regular basis globally makes it a national security threat. Additionally, the fact that it is out in our airspace and all around as travel is moving on, that it is a flight safety issue as well. And it's something that needs to be continued to be pressed, needs to be addressed and tracked.
Now, I'm curious, just play this last part again. Let's play this again. I'm curious about something he said here.
Tell us why.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jesse. The reason it does is twofold. One is the fact that this type of technology is not man-made. It's nothing that we can build or have built or are using out there. And the fact that we're seeing it so prevalently on a regular basis globally makes it a national security threat. Additionally, the fact that it is out in our airspace and all around as travel is moving on, that it is a flight safety issue as well.
Obviously, it's a flight safety issue. Obviously, it's a potential threat to national security, to aviation security, etc. Obviously, clearly. Why is it a threat? Because they can't identify it. And if they can't identify it, then how does this guy know that it's not made by humans? Especially when most of the major cases have been easily described after the fact as being not made by humans, but inflated by humans. You don't know what it is, but you're really sure it's not from this earth. It's not man-made. But how do you know it's not man-made if you can't identify what it is? We are being told nothing here. Absolutely nothing. Here is another Fox News clip. This is Peter Ducey and I think Ryan Graves, the F-18 pilot.
Seems like, at least in my experience here in asking government officials about this, it seems like they are trying to be transparent with these releases, but they also are not saying what they think these UFOs and UAPs are.
Because they don't know, Ducey.
That they're releasing.
They don't know.
With some of them, they're saying we just have no idea what this is.
Yes, so they don't know what it is, but we got officials, former officials, saying that means it's definitely not from this world. We don't know what it is, so it must be not made by humans. Okay, so if you showed somebody an iPhone in 1970, they didn't know what it is. You got a time machine, so does that mean it's alien? I mean, I guess any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, which is kind of interesting when you think about it, because that is what the UFO phenomena actually is. It's something that changes with time. It changes with the way that we advance technologically. Let's go to, before we're out of time, let's go to the war.gov UFO release page. This is the second release of their records. You can see the records here at the bottom. They've actually changed this since the first time I got on here the other day. There's the Syrian UAP, which we talked about earlier. Let's click on a random one of these. So Apollo medical debriefing. Here are UFOs. This file contains an independent report on UFOs written by the French association Cometa, which details the results of a study by the Institute of Higher Studies for National Defense. The file also includes a letter from Carol Rosen in which she notes that she was spokesperson for von Braun in the last years of his life. Something like this was released with the first file dump, and it's nothing new. We know what Cometa is, and we know who Carol Rosen is and her claims, so that is nothing new. We've literally had access to that. Here's another one. This contains memorandums, correspondence, and forms related to the reporting of information on flying disc investigation into sightings. So this is just reporting. This has been available forever too. None of this stuff is new. It's the same story over and over and over again, and nothing ever changes. All right, with the amount of time we have left here on the show, I wanted to go into the chat room and thank you all for joining us tonight. I see Mystical Hydra is here. I see Raw Soul is here. I channeled Raw. I brought him into the chat tonight. Raw is here. Hello, Raw. Dr. Jesse is here as well. By the way, I got those books out to you today. Check your email. Joe Ryder is here. Hello, Joe. Tim, Noka, Edward Preston. Jackie is here. Hello, Jackie. Sonam Ebel is here. And I appreciate that compliment, Jackie. Great points. It's not man-made, but you don't know what it is. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? These people are just clowns. God Saves Cats. It's an interesting screen name. Thank you for joining us. Mad Matt is here. Hello, Matt. And if you want to throw anything on the screen real fast before we're out of time, about 3 minutes, toss it up there in the chat. Say hello to everybody else who's here. Brent Howell is here. Kale is here. Alex is here. Herb Ventures, I think I put your comment up on the screen earlier. Thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the show. Anybody have any last or final thoughts? Any final things that you'd like to add to the broadcast tonight? By the way, we will have I've tried to get some guests on tonight's show, but I had 2 or 3 people that either were unable to do it or sort of bailed at the last minute. I have a bunch of people lined up for the future. It's just a matter of trying to produce and get things set up with everything else I have going on. But John Peasy is definitely coming back on the show. Hello, Jason and Rita in the chat. Thank you for listening tonight. John Peasy is coming back on the show, I think on not next Friday, but the Friday after. So, and we'll probably do, since I think that's when the movie, the UFO movie comes out, the Alien movie comes out. So we'll probably do a show on that on Monday. We got John Peasy coming back, and I've also talked with Chris Michaels, who I was hoping to get on the show tonight to comment on this, but we'll have Chris Michaels back on the show soon. There's a couple of other people that I have lined up. Just understand that I have to produce the show, and I have to host the show, and I have to do the post-production. I have to I write books, and I also have things to do outside of this, and I have to keep my attention on what's happening in the news to keep the show up to date and keep you informed on things and unique perspectives. And it's a lot of work. So if I don't get back to you right away, or if you think like I'm being slow or lazy about something, it's just understand that it's a one-man show here. The website, tstradio.info, rdgable@yahoo.com. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Thank you, Edward Preston in the chat, Joe Ryder and Raw. Thank you, Jackie, Deborah. Patriot Girl is also here. Hello, Patriot Girl. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Yeah, Patriot Girl, John Peasy was hilarious. He's a fun guy. Noka, thank you for tuning in tonight as well. Tonight's show is a rewind. I think I might have to myself go back and listen to it. Maybe pull some sound clips or something. All right, that's the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Oh, thank you, Noka, for the Pokemon show was really fun. If you haven't listened to the Pokemon show we did, the anime manga show we did with Ryder Lee, that's a fun show. I actually have a video of that, and I think I'll put it up. I might put it up in the archive this weekend, so look out for that. Not the archive, but YouTube, so you can actually watch it this weekend. If I get time. If not, it'll be next week. Thank you, Dr. Jesse. I appreciate that. I try to do my best. Thank you, Brent Howell, as well. All right, that's the show. Have a great night. Stay safe, stay informed, stay healthy, and I will talk to you in the next podcast.